Before we get into this, everything in this video is based on official Bureau of Prisons records, Department of Justice documentation, and verified accounts from former inmates and corrections officials. The experiences described are representative of documented conditions across the U.S. federal prison system. This is educational. This is not legal advice. Now let's go. You are wearing a khaki uniform, not orange, not gray, khaki. The same color worn by 2.3 million people in this country, the largest incarcerated population of any nation on earth. But khaki is where the similarity ends, because the man in the minimum security camp 50 miles outside Phoenix is living a completely different life from the man in the concrete box in the Colorado mountains who has not seen another human face in 19 months. Same system, different worlds, 8 levels apart. This is every level of prison in America. Before we start, one number. 2.3 million people are currently incarcerated in the United States. That is more than any country on earth, more than China, more than Russia. And within that system, there are 8 levels of restrictions so different from each other that the person at level 1 and the person at level 8 are technically in the same system and practically in different dimensions. Let's start at the bottom. Level 1. You wake up at 6, not because a guard woke you, because breakfast ends at 6:45 and you want the eggs while they're still warm. You live in a dormitory, not a cell. A dormitory with bunk beds and a common area and a television that plays what the majority votes for. There is no fence around this facility. Technically, there is nothing stopping you from walking away except the additional years they will add to your sentence when they catch you, and they always catch you. Federal prison camps are designed for people the Bureau of Prisons has determined pose the lowest risk. White collar. First offense. Non-violent. The men here are accountants who moved money they should not have moved. Executives who signed documents they should not have signed. Real estate developers, tax attorneys, former city officials, men who wore suits to work until the day they wore handcuffs instead. The work assignments are real. Kitchen detail, grounds maintenance, facility upkeep. You earn between 12 and 40 cents per hour. You have access to a library, a recreation yard, educational programs, phone calls of 15 minutes in length, which cost more per minute than almost any call you made on the outside. This is the bottom of the system. You tell yourself that. You tell yourself, at least you are here and not somewhere else. You will spend the next 2 years learning that the distance between here and somewhere else is shorter than you thought. Level 2. There is a fence now, 2 of them actually, a chain link fence and then another chain link fence with razor wire coiled along the top. Between them there is a strip of ground that nobody walks across. You learn very quickly what that strip means. You learn it the same way you learn most things at this level, by watching what happens to the people who do not understand it yet. Low security institutions house inmates in shared rooms rather than cells, 2 to 4 men per room. Your roommates are not people you chose. They are people the system assigned. You learn their schedules, their habits, which ones sleep lightly, which ones are connected to people on the outside, who can make things happen on the inside. You learn this because knowing it is a survival skill, not because anyone told you it was. The gangs are present here, not controlling. Present. They run the commissary trades, they run the gambling, they run the informal economy that operates alongside the official one. You do not have to participate, but you will be aware of it every day. It will be in every room you walk into. You count days here. You do not count them at level 1. Here you count them. Level 3. This is the first place with a cell door. It closes at 10. It opens at 6. In between, it does not open for you. It opens on the institution's schedule, which is not the same thing as your schedule. And the gap between those 2 realities is where most of the psychological difficulty of incarceration actually lives. Medium security facilities are louder. The air is different, not physically. The air is the same air that moves through any institutional building, recycled and climate-controlled and faintly metallic, but it carries sound differently. Arguments travel further. Silence feels loaded in a way it did not before. You learn to read a room in the 2 seconds before you walk into it. You learn this not as a skill but as a reflex, because the people who do not develop this reflex have worse outcomes. Violence happens here. Not constantly, not inevitably, but it happens. And when it does, it is fast and loud and then suddenly over, and the count bell rings and everyone returns to their assigned locations as if nothing happened. And in the official record, nothing did happen because official records depend on witness testimony, and witnesses at medium security facilities have excellent memories for forgetting. You have been inside long enough now that the outside world has started to feel abstract. Your family's phone calls describe a life that sounds less and less like something you will return to. Level 4. This is the first place with a cell door. It closes at 10. It opens at 6. In between, it does not open for you. It opens on the institution's schedule, which is not the same thing as your schedule. And the gap between those two realities is where most of the psychological difficulty of incarceration actually lives. Medium security facilities are louder. The air is different, not physically. The air is the same air that moves through any institutional building, recycled and climate-controlled and faintly metallic. But it carries sound differently. Arguments travel further. Silence feels loaded in a way it did not before. You learn to read a room in the 2 seconds before you walk into it. You learn this not as a skill but as a reflex, because the people who do not develop this reflex have worse outcomes. Violence happens here. Not constantly, not inevitably, but it happens. And when it does, it is fast and loud, and then suddenly over. And the count bell rings, and everyone returns to their assigned locations as if nothing happened. And in the official record, nothing did happen because official records depend on witness testimony, and witnesses at medium security facilities have excellent memories for forgetting. You have been inside long enough now that the outside world has started to feel abstract. Your family's phone calls describe a life that sounds less and less like something you will return to. Level 5. The federal system is one system, but most of the 2.3 million people incarcerated in America are not in the federal system. They are in state systems. And every state has its own version of the end of the road. California has Pelican Bay. Illinois has Tams. Ohio has the Ohio State Penitentiary. Louisiana has Angola. 180 acres of former plantation land, where inmates still harvest crops under the supervision of armed guards on horseback. These institutions have their own cultures, their own rules, their own informal hierarchies that have evolved over decades. State Supermax conditions vary, but share a common architecture. Isolated housing units. Limited human contact, 22 to 24 hours per day in a cell, with a few hours outside the cell spent alone in a concrete yard the size of a parking space, open to the sky but not to other people. Researchers have documented what happens to human cognition in these conditions: anxiety, hypersensitivity to stimulation, difficulty distinguishing memory from reality. These are not observations about mentally ill people. These are observations about mentally healthy people placed in extended isolation. The distinction matters. The institution often does not make it. You have become someone the system has decided to solve by removing from all systems. Level 6. You end up here because of an incident report. It does not have to be a major incident, a fight, a contraband violation, a verbal threat recorded by a correctional officer. The special housing unit called the SHU, called the Hole, is where the institution sends people it needs to separate from the general population while it processes their case. The cell is smaller, the same general design but smaller. A concrete shelf that functions as a bed, a steel toilet, a steel sink, a desk bolted to the wall, 1 hour of recreation per day in a cage barely larger than the cell itself, alone, without equipment, in a concrete enclosure open at the top to weather. You can hear other people in adjacent cages. You cannot see them. Some of them talk to you through the walls. Sure, you learn to tell by the content of what someone says, whether they were here before they arrived or arrived here. Light comes from a fixture behind a grill in the ceiling. It does not turn off at night. You sleep with your arm across your face. After some time, you stop noticing. The SHU has a checkout process. When they release you back to general population, they give back the items they took: your property, your shoes, your address book, everything that existed before you came in here. You carry it back to your cell, and you understand, clearly and completely, that the person who packed that box and the person unpacking it are not the same person. Level 7. There is one complex of federal prisons in the Colorado High Desert, 90 miles south of Denver. United States Penitentiary. Florence High is not the most restrictive facility in that complex. It is the second most restrictive. For most people who arrive here, it is the last institution they will inhabit. They will die here. Not from violence necessarily, from age, from time. The transfer is done by Con Air. The Bureau of Prisons operates an airline. You are transported in restraints. You do not know your destination until you arrive, because knowing would create planning, and planning creates escape attempts. And escape attempts from this level of the system carry consequences that are not described in the handbook. Florence High sits adjacent to the complex's other facilities. You can see the other buildings from the yard. One of them is smaller and lower and more angular than the rest. You ask about it. Someone tells you the name. You understand what the name means. You do not ask more questions. Some men transfer out of Florence High. Good behavior, step-down programs, time. Most do not. Most remain until the only transfer left is the one that requires a death certificate. Level 8. The garage door opens. The bus drives in. The door shuts. Everything is pitch black. This is how former inmate Jack Powers described his arrival at ADX Florence on October 2nd, 2001. everything done in slow motion. The moment the darkness closed behind him, he understood something that the intake paperwork did not say. ADX Florence opened in 1995. It is the only federal Supermax prison in the United States. 110 miles south of Denver, surrounded by 12 gun towers, spread across 37 acres of Colorado high desert. Former warden Robert Hood described it as a clean version of hell. The Bureau of Prisons describes it as a facility for inmates who have demonstrated an inability to function in a less restrictive environment without being a threat to others. Your cell is 7 by 12 feet, about the size of a parking space. Inside it, a concrete desk, a concrete shelf for a bed, a stainless steel sink and toilet combined into one unit, a shower that runs on a timer, and a small window that lets in light but not view. 22 to 24 hours of every day you spend in this room. The remaining 2 hours are spent alone in a slightly larger concrete room with a small opening to the sky. You see another human face perhaps once a day. A correctional officer slides a tray through a slot in the door. Sometimes they speak, sometimes they do not. This is the primary source of human interaction available to you. El Chapo is here. The Unabomber was here. The Boston Marathon bomber is here. Men whose names were known across the planet. Men who commanded armies, cartels, movements. To them, men who moved billions of dollars and shaped geopolitics from the shadows. All of them end up in the same 7 by 12-foot concrete room, talking to the same slot in the same door, staring at the same small patch of sky. The Bureau of Prisons has a step-down program. Behave well, follow the rules, earn your way to a less restrictive institution. Some people do this. Some people walk out of the Supermax after years and continue their lives somewhere else. Most do not. Most are here because they were designated a threat that does not diminish. They will live in this room until they die in it. The most dangerous men in America, in the most secure building in America, in cells designed to make them completely harmless. It works. They are harmless now. That is the thing about the system. It always achieves what it designs for. But it was the question nobody asks at the beginning is whether what it designs for is the same as what it says it is.